a young woman whose life was marked by struggle, love, sacrifice, and a heartbreaking end that shocked everyone who learned her name. She was only 22 years old when she walked into the nightclub where she worked one ordinary evening, never knowing she would never walk out again. To those around her, Jiren was a woman trying to survive. She was a mother, a partner, a dreamer, and someone who wanted more from life than the hardships she had been given. But on that final night, desperation and trust would place her in the path of people far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Jiren was born into a large family and grew up in an environment where emotional warmth was often missing. With several siblings and many challenges inside the home, she learned early that attention and security were not guaranteed. Like many children raised in unstable circumstances, she longed for acceptance, comfort, and a sense of belonging. As a teenager, she moved away and tried to build a better future for herself. During that time, the family of one of her close friends welcomed her into their home. They gave her support, structure, and encouragement when she needed it most. With their help, Jiren continued school and eventually graduated, proving that despite the chaos of her early years, she had intelligence and determination. Those who knew her often described her as thoughtful and creative. She loved writing poetry and used words to express feelings she sometimes struggled to speak aloud. She had dreams beyond survival. She wanted stability, love, and the kind of life that would feel safe. As she entered adulthood, she worked several jobs, always trying to earn enough to stand on her own feet. Around this period, she became closer to a man named Jeremy Foster, someone who had known her since she was young. Their friendship turned into romance, and over time they built a serious relationship. Together they welcomed a daughter named Riley. Becoming a mother changed Jiren deeply. She adored her child and wanted to give her everything she had lacked growing up. But love does not erase poverty, and soon the couple found themselves under severe financial pressure. Bills mounted, work was inconsistent, and they struggled to maintain housing. Eventually, the burden became so heavy that they had to place their daughter with family members temporarily so she could have a more secure environment while they tried to recover. It was one of the most painful decisions Jiren ever made. Wanting to earn more money, Jiren began working in an adult entertainment club as a dancer. She chose the work because it paid more than many jobs available to her, but she maintained personal boundaries. She danced for customers, but she refused invitations for private meetings or additional services. Some coworkers accepted such offers because the money was significantly higher, but Jiren insisted certain lines would not be crossed. She believed she could earn what she needed while still protecting herself. Yet the reality was harsh. Refusing extra offers meant her income stayed limited, and each week became another battle to keep up with rent, food, and basic survival. Her mother reportedly disapproved of the work entirely, believing the environment itself was unsafe and that there had to be another path. But when bills are due and options are few, people often choose whatever seems possible. By early summer of 2012, the financial situation between Jiren and Jeremy had become critical. They were living in a low-cost motel and were behind on payments. Eviction felt close. They asked others for help, but no one was able or willing to rescue them. Stress filled every day. Jiren knew they needed money quickly, or they would lose even the little shelter they had left. Then came the night that would change everything. Jiren went to work expecting an ordinary shift. She likely planned to return home after closing, rest, and continue searching for a way out of their crisis. Instead, sometime during the evening, a man and a woman approached her. They were not strangers to the club. Staff recognized them as visitors who had been there before. That familiarity may have lowered suspicion. According to later accounts, they offered a large amount of money for Jiren to attend a private gathering. For someone under crushing financial pressure, the offer must have sounded like temporary salvation. A few hours of work could solve immediate problems, cover rent, and buy breathing room. Jiren had refused such invitations before, but desperation changes the weight of risk. That night, she agreed. She left with them. It would be the last confirmed time she was seen alive. When Jiren did not return home, Jeremy became worried. He called repeatedly, but she did not answer. He went looking for her, but the club had closed. Panic replaced confusion. Eventually, police were contacted, and a missing person report was filed. Investigators began with the usual questions. Had she left voluntarily? Was she avoiding someone? Was there trouble at work? Did anyone see where she went? Her job naturally became a focus. Police spoke with employees and reviewed who had been present that night. They learned she had completed her shift normally and had left with a man and woman. Soon, surveillance footage confirmed it. The video showed Jiren speaking with the pair before exiting alongside them. Officers now had persons of interest, but not yet names. Before the investigation could progress much further, a horrifying discovery changed the case completely. Human remains were found along the Gulf Coast. Authorities quickly realized the remains belonged to a woman. Distinctive tattoos helped with identification, and those close to Jiren confirmed the markings matched hers. The missing persons case instantly became a homicide investigation. As searches continued, additional body parts were recovered in nearby areas. Detectives concluded the victim had been dismembered and the remains discarded in water, likely from a bridge or remote access point where currents could carry them away. Even experienced officers were shaken by the brutality involved. Whoever had done this had not only killed a young mother, but had attempted to erase her identity and obstruct discovery. Investigators returned to the nightclub and questioned staff more thoroughly. One dancer revealed that the same man and woman had also approached her with a similar offer of money to attend a private event. She refused, because something about them felt wrong. That detail became critical. It suggested Jiren may not have been specifically targeted at first. Rather, the pair seemed determined to leave with any woman willing to go. Another statement added further unease. One of the suspects allegedly said they needed to find a girl or something bad would happen. At first, it sounded bizarre, almost meaningless, but detectives could not ignore it. Why the urgency? Why the insistence? What exactly was supposed to happen if they failed? Police released surveillance images to the public, hoping someone would identify the pair. The footage was grainy, but tattoos on the male suspect stood out clearly enough to become a key clue. Tips quickly poured in. Several people recognized the man as a neighbor who had recently moved into the area. His name was Terry Speaks. When authorities examined his record, they found a troubling history involving sexual offenses and registration violations. That background immediately raised alarm. Officers moved quickly to locate him. When they searched the residence connected to him, they found no obvious evidence tying Jiren to the property. Yet the scene appeared suspiciously clean, as if efforts had been made to remove traces of whatever happened there. Forensic teams collected materials for testing anyway. Later, Terry and a woman named Margaret Sanchez were stopped during a traffic incident and taken into custody on unrelated matters. Detectives believed they were the same pair seen leaving with Jiren. During questioning, both denied involvement in murder. They admitted spending time with Jiren, but claimed she had visited for a private party, stayed briefly, been paid, and then left unharmed. They offered no convincing explanation for the gaps in their story. Terry repeatedly claimed memory problems and said many nights blended together. Margaret described earlier strange remarks as superstition or harmless ritual language. Investigators were unconvinced, but at that moment, they still lacked direct physical evidence strong enough to immediately secure murder convictions. Public attention intensified. News outlets covered the gruesome case daily. Residents were horrified that such violence had happened so close to home. Jiren's family mourned while waiting for answers. They knew she had made difficult choices to survive. But they also knew she was more than the job headlines emphasized. She was a mother who loved her daughter, a woman trying to recover from hardship, and someone who deserved to come home safely. Behind the headlines was a human being whose life mattered. As the months passed, the case seemed uncertain from the outside, but investigators continued building it piece by piece, examining communications, timelines, prior behavior, and every contradiction in the suspect's statements. What they would uncover next would reveal a darker motive than many had imagined and move the case closer to justice. As months passed after the arrest of Terry Speaks and Margaret Sanchez, many people feared the case against them might collapse. There was enormous suspicion, public outrage, and a mountain of circumstantial evidence, but prosecutors still needed enough proof to present a convincing case in court. Jiren Lockhart's family had already suffered the unbearable pain of losing her in a brutal and humiliating manner, and the thought that no one might ever be held responsible only deepened their grief. Investigators refused to let the case fade. They continued studying every detail, every interview, every movement, and every connection between the two suspects. What slowly emerged was a picture of manipulation, obsession, and violence. While Terry remained in custody on other charges, Margaret was eventually released after her bail was reduced. This decision shocked many in the community. To the public, both had been the last known people seen with Jiren, yet one suspect was now free. Legally, prosecutors still needed stronger evidence directly tying her to the killing. During this period, Margaret continued visiting Terry in prison. Their relationship, already unstable, began to fracture under the pressure of incarceration and looming prosecution. According to investigators, Margaret later informed Terry that she had met someone else and intended to move on with her life. That revelation triggered anger and resentment. Terry reportedly began threatening to reveal everything that had happened. He no longer wanted to protect her while she enjoyed freedom outside prison walls. This shift became a turning point in the investigation. Authorities obtained communications between the two, including letters, messages, and monitored calls. Those exchanges suggested both had deeper knowledge of the murder than they had admitted publicly. Detectives also re-examined Margaret's interests and associations. They discovered evidence that she had been fascinated by occult themes, ritual symbolism, and bizarre beliefs involving sacrifice and spiritual power. Investigators were cautious not to confuse unusual beliefs with criminal guilt, but in the context of earlier statements about needing to find a girl before something bad happened, the information gained significance. What once sounded like random superstition now appeared connected to a disturbing mindset that may have influenced the crime. Prosecutors believed they finally had a possible motive. Their theory was that Jiren had been lured to the home under the promise of easy money, and then attacked in connection with fantasies, violence, and a need for control. Whether ritual belief truly drove the murder or merely provided a twisted excuse, the result was the same. An innocent woman was dead. In 2013, Margaret was arrested again and formally charged. The state prepared to try Terry and Margaret separately, a strategy often used when co-defendants may blame one another. Terry's trial came first. He entered the courtroom with unusual confidence, apparently believing the lack of direct physical evidence guaranteed acquittal. At one stage, he even chose to represent himself. Judges generally warn defendants against this because criminal trials are highly technical and dangerous for anyone without legal training. Still, Terry insisted. He appeared convinced he could outsmart prosecutors and expose weaknesses in their case. But confidence is not evidence, and arrogance is not strategy. Once testimony began, the weight of the case became clear. Witnesses placed Terry and Margaret with Jiren at the club. Surveillance footage showed them leaving together. Their own statements acknowledged she had gone to their residence. Multiple lies and contradictions weakened credibility. Jailhouse witnesses testified that Terry had spoken about the killing while incarcerated. Investigators described the disposal of the body and efforts to conceal the crime. The prosecution argued that even if no single piece of evidence told the whole story, the combined facts pointed overwhelmingly to guilt. After only a short time handling his own defense, Terry abandoned the idea and requested legal counsel. But by then, the damage was done. The jury had already seen enough to understand the prosecution's narrative. Following deliberations, they returned guilty verdicts. Terry Speaks was convicted of murder and related offenses. He received a life sentence, ensuring he would spend the remainder of his years behind bars unless future appeals somehow changed the outcome. For Jiren's family, The conviction brought relief, but not peace. Nothing could restore what had been taken. Still, one of the people responsible had finally been held accountable. Margaret's case remained unresolved. She now faced the reality that Terry had been convicted and that evidence against her would soon be tested before another jury. Prosecutors also held communications suggesting involvement after the killing, including attempts to hide the truth. Rather than risk trial and potentially harsher outcomes, Margaret chose to negotiate a plea agreement. In court, she admitted her role in the death of Jiren Lockhart. She acknowledged that she and Terry convinced Jiren to leave the club and come to their home. There, Jiren was killed. Margaret further admitted helping dismember the body and assisting in the disposal of remains in the Gulf waters to hide the crime. Hearing those facts stated plainly in court was devastating for the family. It confirmed their worst fears. Jiren had not simply vanished or been killed in sudden rage. She had been lured, murdered, and desecrated afterward by two people who saw her vulnerability as an opportunity. Margaret was sentenced to decades in prison, through consecutive terms for manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Though shorter than Terry's life sentence, the punishment still meant the majority of her adult life would be spent incarcerated. With the plea, both principal offenders were legally condemned. Yet, the story continued through appeals. Terry insisted he was innocent or unfairly convicted. Supporters and romantic partners reportedly emerged, some claiming Margaret manipulated him or that he had been framed. Such reactions are not uncommon in notorious criminal cases, where certain individuals become drawn to dangerous personalities or conspiracy theories. Courts reviewed Terry's claims, but ultimately refused to overturn the conviction. Higher courts declined to intervene, leaving the verdict intact. Justice, while imperfect and delayed, remained in place. Behind all legal outcomes stands the human cost. Jiren Lockhart had entered adulthood, carrying burdens many never face. Childhood instability, financial hardship, the pain of separation from her daughter, and the pressure to survive in a world that often punishes the vulnerable. She worked difficult jobs not because she lacked worth, but because opportunity had been limited. Like countless struggling parents, she was trying to solve immediate problems with the options available to her. On the night she accepted the offer to leave with Terry and Margaret, she likely thought only of rent, food, and a chance to ease the pressure crushing her family. That is what makes the case especially tragic. Evil often hides behind ordinary promises. The money offered was not merely bait. It was targeted exploitation of someone in need. Those responsible recognized desperation and used it as a weapon. They counted on the fact that a woman under financial strain might take a risk she would normally refuse. In that sense, the crime was not only violent, but predatory from the beginning. Jiren's daughter would grow up without her mother. Her family would carry grief for decades. Friends who remembered her poetry, humor, and kindness were left with memories overshadowed by headlines describing brutality. Yet people close to her repeatedly tried to reclaim her identity from sensationalism. They wanted the world to know she was more than the circumstances of her death. She was intelligent, creative, loving, and determined. She had made mistakes, as all people do, but she deserved safety, dignity, and the chance to keep building her future. Cases like this also reveal broader truths about society. Many victims are judged for the jobs they held, the places they went, or the risks they took while trying to survive. But responsibility belongs to those who choose cruelty, not those struggling through poverty. Jiren did not cause what happened to her by needing money. She was targeted by people who decided to harm another human being. That distinction matters. In remembering Jiren Lockhart, we remember a young mother who wanted stability, a daughter who sought love, and a woman who kept trying despite repeated hardship. We also remember the importance of listening when vulnerable people need support, creating safer paths for those trapped by economic desperation, and refusing to reduce victims to stereotypes. Her life was larger than one terrible night. Though her final chapter was written by violence, the rest of her story was written by resilience. and that is how she deserves to be remembered.